Originally, we were just going to talk about Myers-Briggs, but I also want to talk about Enneagram. So we'll get to that too in a minute here. But let's start off with Myers-Briggs. MD, what is the Myers-Briggs test?
Sure. So probably most people may have heard of the Myers-Briggs. It's a personality test, like the ones you might have done in like a magazine when you were in high school, or like on what's that website where everyone does those like little pointless tests? It's like
Facebook?
Oh, sure, Facebook, whatever. But it's like much more corporate and like claims to be psychologically based, right? Based in like actual science,
right?
And so a lot of like corporations will get you to do this Myers-Briggs personality test when you go through their hiring process. And what it claims to do is break people up into like 16 categories. So you'd be like one of these 16 categories, and it describes your personality ostensibly along 4 axes. And the 4 categories, or the 4 axes that they have, are like whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you do like sensing or intuition, so like sort of the way you interact with the world, you're thinking versus feeling, and then you're judging versus perceiving. So those are the four like spectra that they use, the 4 categories, and your combination of those factors puts you into a personality type according to the Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
So go ahead.
Is it scientifically based? MD aware? People claim it to be.
So every study that has looked at this has shown that it is not scientifically based. I find, that is one thing. And psychologists and people who study personality have looked at the test and found issues with 2 major things, which are the most important things when we're talking about a test like this. So they have problems with its validity, and validity is a measure of how well a test measures what you think it's measuring, right? So if I have a ruler and I want to, and its job is to measure the length of something, if I put it up against some standard ruler and the markings don't match up, then it has poor validity. So Myers-Briggs does really poorly on that metric, but it also does poorly on the other metric, which is reliability, which is how repeatable it is. So with something like personality, you would expect a personality is sort of by definition a stable thing. And if you do the test on different days, you'll get the same personality type, the same result. But that's also an issue for the Myers-Briggs. So it also fails there. But I think it's maybe even more interesting if you dig into the history of it. And the podcast Science Diction did a really good 3-part series on the Myers-Briggs and the history of the Myers-Briggs, and how basically there was 2 people who invented it. It was like a mother and her daughter. And the mother was basically obsessed with Carl Jung and just based all of her ideas on his ideas. And she basically just made it up whole cloth based on her like subjective interactions with the people around her. Yeah. And what she observed in her kids and stuff like that. And it just sort of got picked up as things go. But it really, to me, is basically a pop psychology horoscope. That's the way I see these, like this personality test, but a lot of personality tests as well. Now, you've had some experience with it, right?
Yeah. And I was going to say, before we move on, everybody in the comments who's watching this video, please pause. And I want you guys to guess what mine is and what MD Aware is. And I would love to see that data looks like. And while we're doing it too, if you know about it, do our Enneagrams too. I want to see that if you know, but if you don't know about it, I'll talk about it in a second. But please pause the video right now and do that so I can read the comments later. That would be great. People in the live chat, go ahead, give your guesses because we'll do it in a sec. So my first knowledge, because like I always knew about it, I had to take it in high school, right? And it's one of those things where your Enneagram
class
type
or something, right?
Yeah, well, like they want you to like figure out what career path is best for you based on this test, and I've done job applications where I've had to take a test that's either based off Enneagram or very similar. You know, it takes those kind of same principles.
Based off Enneagram or Myers-Briggs?
Based off, sorry, I said Enneagram. I meant Myers-Briggs. Right. Based off Myers-Briggs. and it's the same thing, right? They want to figure out how you're going to fit into the culture of that company. And it's kind of sus, right? If we're saying that this is not based on a legitimate science, which, and to be fair, right, the original observations that were made by the woman, like that test is different from what they use now, like for Myers-Briggs, right? Like there's a lot more questions and there's a lot more people that have put input into it. But those same problems that you're talking about, just like, we all really want to have objective measurements on people and put people into boxes, but like it just doesn't do enough to make those categories fit, in my opinion. I mean, that seems to be the problem, right? Yeah. And along with just like the predictors, it would be interesting if people who could look at that data could like test and see, oh, you are this person. But the problem is the questionnaire, it kind of proves itself in a way, right? Like you have to, if you answer these things, you are this. Like there's no control that you can base on for that. So it doesn't. Yeah.
It basically, you answer some questions, and it's like, you tell the test, like, I sometimes feel anxious. I like being a leader, and it feeds back to you. You really like being a leader. You're sometimes anxious, and you're like, great, I just told you that.
Exactly.
And so if you look at what the Myers-Briggs Institute says their test is good for, they've backed off on most of their claims. So they no longer recommend that people use it to decide who to hire, and they don't use it necessarily to predict what people will interact well with what people. And so they've backed off to the point where you have to ask yourself, well, what does it even mean then? What good is it if it's not predictive for something? How do you use it? And a lot of corporations will just use it, outside of what the Myers-Briggs Institute says it should be used for. And I think what they say it should be used for is basically just, reflection, essentially.
Yeah, and I think that's valuable. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think answering.
I don't know if you need to pay like however much it costs.
No. And take a free test, absolutely, right?
Well, or just think about yourself and your interactions.
Sure. Some people aren't very good at self-reflection, though. I think that having a test to say, hey, are you anxious? Just asking that, maybe would tell you, oh, you're anxious sometimes. Like some people need that. I feel like maybe it doesn't have to be in the clinical settings. Yeah, I don't think you have to treat it like a diagnosis. Like, oh, you've been given, this is your lot in life where you have to follow the prescriptions based on what gurus have to say about it. I don't think that's true, but I don't know. Like, and maybe I'm biased because I actually kind of like Enneagram, and we'll talk about that in a second too. Okay. But like Myers-Briggs has also been interesting anecdotally for me. Like, for example, my current partner is supposedly my most ideal type, and we get along great. So it's like, there it is. And earlier, MD, I guessed what your type was right off the bat, and that's a 1 in 16 chance.
How did you do it? How did you do it? What was your method?
I did it because I know you enough, so I know that you're kind of introverted. So the eye is kind of there. You just kind of process of elimination, I think. But like I think you can maybe in that sense there's some predictability, but it's still kind of.
But isn't that just again like summarizing the things that you already knew about me?
Yeah. But I guess like if you don't know that about yourself, I don't know. Like if you're 10 years old and you're figuring yourself, well, I don't know. Is it useful if you're 10?
But modern understandings of personality is that they're shifting while you're developing, but your personality settles in during your adulthoods, right? So so really, you would expect a good personality test to be essentially useless. During like childhood and adolescence, and then be useless in a different way because it's always the same throughout your entire adult life, right? Yeah,
it'll never be a Minority Report situation, right? Where we just figure out, oh, well, based on this personality type, we got to put you in jail like right now. Like,
exactly.
I don't think any test would ever be capable of that. But I don't know. I think what does bother me is what you did talk about, which is paying money to figure out yourself when you don't need to do that. Like that stuff's kind of extra. I think taking a test is fun. Outside of that, I don't recommend any of that. If you're getting paid to get people into the school of thought, I think it can kind of make you have misunderstandings of how science works, probably. And at least how.
But, you also to me, I also think about like, well, what's the purpose of this, and what is it actually doing? Is it dividing us more? Is it causing people to not get job offers because they scored something on this personality test? So I think that there's a lot of unintended consequences of things like the Myers-Briggs, where people think they're gleaning something useful and meaningful about a person, when really the actions based on those faulty conclusions are going to be harmful.
Yeah, you raise a good point. In my head, it's like, here's astrology and here's Myers-Briggs. It's like slightly above. And the reason why I put it slightly above is because astrology, like, you're just born, and whatever you're born on, that's it. That's your whole thing. That doesn't make any sense to me. At least you're asking some questions and you're getting some, even if it's stuff you already know about yourself, there's some information beyond just the alignment of the stars that's determining who you are. So I can resonate with that, I guess, on some level. But I agree. The whole industry is kind of whack. Even though personality typing systems have been in a resurgence, astrology, of course, is having a renewal. But along with astrology, MD, is also the Enneagram. The Enneagram is coming back in full force, and I want to talk to you about the Enneagram. Now, you didn't know about the Enneagram.
No,
you never heard of it.
That's right. So I'm eager to learn.
I know about the Enneagram because at one point in my life, MD, I was a progressive Christian, and progressive Christians are having a moment with Enneagram. I feel like 9 out of 10, if you ask a progressive Christian what their Enneagram type is, they're going to be super excited to tell you because they already know. I feel like it's a thing. So, like, what is Enneagram? The history of it is really, really murky. It's very, very murky, and different people will claim different things. The claim is that it has its roots in Jewish mysticism, like Jewish Kabbalism, and this is something that ostensibly has Judeo-Christian origins, specifically Jewish origins, and that's why you see it in so many Christian circles, because, well, it's of God in some way, right? And
at least they're doing some sort of like appeal to antiquity as well, right?
Right, exactly. So there's some ancient wisdom going on here, right? But there is no evidence, like hard evidence, of the Enneagram existing before the year like 1950. Like, there's a bunch of people that have talked about it, and some people that have wrote books about it and had some theories. But it's very vague and it's very weird. There is not a clear, definite history on the origin of this stuff. So that should already be suspect. But you know what? Maybe the origin doesn't matter. Maybe it's the methodology, right? So what is the methodology of Enneagram?
Well, what is the methodology?
It bases your personality on to 9 numbers, okay? And each of these numbers, they kind of have a shape for it. It looks like a pentagram, but it's not, because it's little lines that connect on a circle to each of these numbers. And what those numbers mean is you have different points on that axis that tell you something about yourself. So 1 is the reformer or the perfectionist. 2 is the helper or giver. I guess I'll go through all of them. 3 is the achiever or performer. 4 is the individualist or romantic. 5, investigator or observer. 6 is the loyalist or loyal skeptic. 7 is the enthusiast. 8 is the challenger or protector. And 9 is the peacemaker or mediator. Okay, so basically, just like Myers-Briggs, you are this type and you can't change it. Like, this is you your whole life. Okay. And there's some systems that allow for wings. So you can be a 5 with a 6 wing, or a 7 with a 6 wing. It's whatever number's right next to you, because you can have a little bit of both of those traits. So that already kind of muddles it down, but then it gets even murkier. Okay. Because that's your base number. In times of stress, you actually turn out to be a different number. So
interesting.
If you're a 9 and you get stressed, you represent traits of a 6. But if you're actually really secure in yourself, you represent traits of a 3. So really, you kind of are just all over the place with these numbers.
And what do they? What do, like, I don't know? What do they think that you can do with these results?
The idea is a kind of like Myers-Briggs. It kind of tells you about yourself. And it tells you what your limitations are and your strengths are, and maybe also what you would be good at in your career, and what is going to be best for your life outcome. In a Christian sense, it may be what God's plan is for you. What God has made you to be. you know.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like different, just like Myers-Briggs, you know, there's Enneagram Institute, there's organizations that have taken this to use it in a professional context and have tried to study celebrities, have tried to study people in history and figure out what theirs would be so they can kind of match it up to their charts.
Wow, that's interesting too.
Yeah, it's a whole thing.
Because I just took the Enneagram after you mentioned it today, and it was a lot of like, how do you feel about this yourself? I can't imagine how they would get someone who's dead to do the test.
Yeah, basically, it's just like a decision-making software system, right? You have to rank it. You rank your options from number from 1 to 5. So they're making the assumption of what those people would rank. Is basically what they're doing.
Seems pretty spurious to me.
Seems legit to me. I don't know. That's just science. Making guesses of what other people would put on a survey. That's just, I mean, come on. Doesn't get more scientific than that. But it is a fascinating institution, and it fascinates me just because there is just a subculture of which I was a part of, that being kind of progressive Christian circles that are just really all over this thing. Like, it has been popping off. Like, if you think astrology is popular, Enneagram is just as popular in those circles. It really is. It's Christian astrology. Absolutely. Oh yeah. So now I think, MD, we should say what our personalities were. Okay. So mine is ENFP. I'm an ENFP according to Myers-Briggs. Extroverted, intuitive, feeling perceptive. And Enneagram, I'm a 4. I'm a 4 with a 5 wing. So I'm an individualist, but I also got that 5 wing. So that specific typing is called the Bohemian, which is great.
Interesting.
I love that name for it. Yeah. So and I think those both make sense for me, but again, it has to make sense for me, right? Because like, you know,
gave you the answer.
I gave him the answers for it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what are your types, MD?
So my Myers-Briggs is INTJ, which is according to theirs is the architect personality.
Okay.
And they say that I'm very detail oriented and I'm a tactician, whatever that means.
Okay.
And then my Enneagram number is an 8, which is a protector. And in their description, it says that I like debating. So they got that right.
There you go. I was surprised that you got the 8. I would have thought you would have gotten the 1, which is the perfectionist.
The 1?
That's the perfectionist. Okay. And that was my guess for you. But 4 kind of works for me. You know, I noticed it's all the famous artists that have troubled lives. It's Amy Winehouse and Kurt Cobain are supposedly all 4s and stuff. It's like, oh, okay. Gotta make sure mental health is good. Yeah, that's what that tells me. But anyway, yeah. So personality typing systems. What do you guys think? I want to know. Call us and tell us, are we full of it? Maybe we're interpreting these results wrong and we don't know what we're talking about, and you're an expert. Or
maybe you have an even better personality test that you know.
Yeah.
That we're not aware of.
Yeah, but don't make us take it on the air, especially if it's like 100-question test, because that's not cool for listeners. But a comment section, maybe. You know, I'm interested in reading that. So the number to that is 512-991-9242, or you can call in tiny.cc/calltw on your computer or other electronic device, and we would love to talk to you. We have some open lines.